Good evening, everybody. Welcome again to another illuminating and interesting discussion with General Lennit Max, retired, former head of the Western Cape, or rather provincial commissioner of the Western Cape, and who is joining us now for umpteenth time. You're becoming a regular visitor, General. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to speak to us. And the topic of tonight's discussion, I think, is something that is incredibly relevant and important and that most people will find interesting. And that is with regards to gangs, gangsterism, the plague thereof, and how it is supposed to be combated, how it's presently being combated, the challenges faced therein. You've had a long police career, General. In your experience, how did it all start with, let's start with a bit of backstory, your experience with gangs when you were in the police. How did that sort of play out?
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me again, Gideon. It's always a pleasure to talk about the safety and security of our people. Gideon, yes, I think I sent you some time back a short bio about me, where I come from and so forth. And I just want to tell you a very short story. It's actually a long story, but let me cut it. My first experience with gangs. Now, I'm from the Platteland, from the Overberg. And so I applied to become a police officer. And then in October 1980, I was then enrolled. So as a student, I worked in Cape Town, but I stayed in Elsie's River, Lousebos, place known as Lousebos. And when I arrived from Bot River, where I worked before as a railway laborer, I didn't know anyone in the metro. And the only accommodation I could get is in a shack in Lousebos, Elsie's River. And these people were waiting for their house, to be allocated. And the first week, I couldn't even read properly the train rosters, to check which train I can use in time to get in time to work and back. And I work in Cape Town, and I had to travel by train from Cape Town to West Coast Station, and then walk through the old Epping residential area, which is now Reykjavik, and then cross the robot where the Elsie's River police station is now, because that time it was an open field. And my my first week completed as a police officer, I took a train to 11 the Friday evening in Cape Town, and I arrived here just after 11 at West Coast Station, and it's dark. And I walked down to Lousebos. And the only weapon I had on me at the time to protect myself was a 3-star knife. And as I approached the robot where the police station is now, I look at my left and I saw a Valiant. And that Valiant, on the bonnet were guys sitting, at the back guys were sitting, and that thing's exhaust pipe was scratching on the tar. And they approached me, and the one guy shouted, "There is the end." I didn't know them. They don't know me, but I'm accused of something. I had for the 4 days when I come back from work, I had a difficulty to find the shack. You know, that night, something said to me, "You have to run now." And I kick off. I ran, man, like hell. And I'm not a person who can, run fast. But that evening, I think I broke the world record. And as I ran through the shacks, I saw a fence, because in front of the shack there was a fence, a little yard, and I jumped over this barbed wires, and I fell into the shadow of a zinc, sheet, which gives some shadow, and I lied there. But my heart was pumping, I'm telling you, and I pushed my chest, you know, onto the ground, so that for me it was so pumping so hard that I was fearing that they could hear my heart pumping, And these guys ran past, and I lie there. I lied there in that shade. I didn't move at all. And after a while, I heard a guy said, "That end is gone." And that guy was standing next to that sheet where I was lying behind. And I look around, and they moved. And I look around to find out where was I, in whose yard I am. And I saw a plant, some plants there in the yard, but that does look familiar. And I look up to the door. There's a number on the door. And I realized I jumped into the correct yard of the place where I was staying. And I leopard crawled to the door, and I knocked. And this woman opened up the door, and I crawled into the house, and she asked me, but what is the situation? And I explained to her. I said to her I was chased, and this is the thing. Now, let me tell you, that evening, God's hands were, really on me, protecting me. If those guys caught me that evening, then I would have been in a position to talk and chat to you about my experience with regards to gangsters. Now, gangsters is a real danger in our society. But you see, there's the police, the government actually approach gangsters of gangsterism only in a way that they treat the symptom and not the cause of gangsterism. You know, if you studied criminology, then you will see that your discipline and you are formed in your household, in the family, then in the school and church, and then further on in the workplace. Now, if you take gangsterism and why is it difficult to police gangsterism and why the conviction rate of gangsters is very low, is for the following reasons. First of all, is that gangsterism actually prevails and is very active within a very poor community. People who are being neglected, because people who have been marginalized and forgotten,
Yeah.
for government forgot about them. And you will see that most of these gangsters are very youngsters, about 12 years upwards, 24 years, and so on. Now, gangsters recruit their future members, not only from high school, but from primary school as well, to recruit them. And these kids grew up in a gang environment, and all they know is the signs. You will see how the hand signs they actually produce, and the way that they talk, and that is the language that they are used to, and the role models which they are following in that community. Now, the government throw to the gang problem only the South African police. They throw police to the problem. Now, as long as government continue of throwing that police to the problem alone, that is not going to eradicate gangsterism. And I will get to the point where when there's a sanction, and when they go to jail. Now, in your gangs, and the reason why your gangsters are so protected within a particular community, they form a second economy or a third economy within that particular community. Now, as I said, that is a forgotten community, because if you look in the Western Cape, if you take the Western Cape on its own, then you will see on the Cape Flats that gangsterism is actually very prevalent, on the Cape Flats. Now, if you take that Cape Flats and you look at the unemployment rate in that particular area, it is very, very high. And it is very conducive for that kind of criminal activity. Now, you've got these kids who actually left school very early. They are not, equipped for any other professional jobs. They are not job ready, and the only alternative to them is to get involved in gangsterism and to be recognized and acknowledged and respected and feel part of a alternative family. Now, many of these gangsters come out of broken homes. There's no father. Maybe the father's absent, and the
There's
only role
substance
model they got.
abuse, all the
Precisely.
bad things.
That's right. Now, and the mother is struggling, or the family is struggling. They are, unemployed, and they've got needs to address, and so on. And these gangsters will then, come out and support them with rent, buy
Mhm.
food, pay for the school clothes uh, and school fees. But in return, they must do something. There's nothing like a free lunch. They have to do something in return. And that is where these gangsters become so integrated in our communities and so protective. When I was provincial commissioner and I signed a section 13.7 warrant for a cordon and search operation, then when we approach these flats, you will see how these people at night throw us with urine, once we move up with the stairs, because we are a threat to their existence,
Yeah.
to their income, to their maintenance. If we take the arrest the gangster, obviously it has an impact on their financial situation and their existence.
So they're so strongly embedded in those
But
communities.
precisely,
It's almost like an insurgent in
precisely,
rural Afghanistan. It's not the same problem, but it's close.
yeah, yeah. So and the gangs know this. So in turn, and as the kids grow up, they use the kids, as runners to sell their drugs and to hide, illegal substances or firearms, etc. Now, the problem is, I always said, when I was the MEC for community safety in the Western Cape, I said to my caucus that I might be seen as I'm very subjective when I come to safety and security. I said, I hear you people are talking about investments, education, and all these things. I said, that is good. But if there's no safety, these things is impossible to operate. So I put a very place a very high value on the safety and security of our communities. Now, the problem with gangsterism in our communities, as I said, is that they become very dependent on our the gangsters. Then you get also the corruption, police corruption, and then you get correctional services corruption. And let me say to you, in 2018, I was part of, whilst I was a member of the portfolio committee on education, we visited a school in Valhalla Park, and it's a primary school. Now, we arrived there about 2 o'clock because the rule was and is still, I believe, that you don't interfere with the school time, learning time. So when the
Hmm.
portfolio committee visits the school, it must be after hours. And this headmaster was off sick. So we arrived there, and the headmaster was present, and we sat there in the conference room. But the windows face the street. Um, And whilst he explained to us the reason why he was on stress leave was because he disciplined one child, and this child's father came the next day and wanted to know what happened, and he explained to the father what went wrong, and that's why he kept the kid behind after school as punishment. And as the father walked out with the kid, he pulled out the gun and turned back and say, swear at him and shoot at him. It missed him by inches, and the bullet hit the notice board. And whilst he was explaining that, we heard a noise outside, and we saw school children, and that is now school children from the high school, came across from the side of the high school, passing the primary school, and in front of them were about 15 youngsters in private clothes. And he said to us, if you look at this scene here, those kids are the kids from the high school, which is around the corner. They stay in the territory of another gang, and that school is in the territory of the other gang. And those youngsters in front, they are the gangs from the area where these kids are staying. So these gangs, bus them, actually, bus them to school in the morning to protect them against attacks from the other gang. And when the school finish, they fetch them and walk them back to their territory. And whilst he was explaining to us, a shot went off, and the police officers were present, crime prevention head, and as well as the station commander of Philippi. And those kids, like we were trained, if a shot is fired, you go down. Those kids fell to the ground as one person, as if they were trained. And he said to us, can you people see the reaction of these kids? That is what they actually experience on a daily basis. They know exactly what to do when a shot is fired. And I look at this whole thing, and now the problem comes in now, Gideon. Those matriculants, those high school kids, when they finish there and they become police officers, prosecutors, magistrates, or judges, they owe those gangsters. Those gangsters put their lives, at risk to protect them, to allow them to get education. Now, at one particular time, they have to pay back. They have to reward them as well. And that is where you get this corruption, because from those kids who become police officers, I mean, their education will maybe paid by an uncle or a family member who were involved in any other illegal trade. And that money actually made it possible for him or her to get their qualification. And you cannot, and that's why I said to the minister at the time, you cannot follow this principle out of the community for the community within a specific residential area. You have to transfer that person to another area. Otherwise, that person is compromised already. So there are police officers who are inherent corrupt, and as well as prosecutors, as well as warders. But there are those, by virtue of the circumstances, are compelled to be corrupt because of the circumstances. So it is a very difficult.
I was about to say it's a very difficult and complicated problem. But so that hugely describes the low conviction rate issue. That cuts to the core of many of these things. A couple of years ago, 2019, I think, I wrote an article when the SANDF was first redeployed, so to speak, to the flats for a very short stint, where I criticized it and I said this is doomed to fail, because firstly the purpose of the SANDF is certainly not the complicated task of combating gangs. It's not a organization that's equipped for this. And it wasn't well received by a lot of people who read it. But I'd like to know how far off the mark I was. So when we talk about genuine working strategies in combating this, it's almost a disease that infects entire communities, and that's carried on from generation to generation. Where does one start? Because it's not a political problem. It's social and it's economic, but politics appear to have very little to do with this.
Let me first say you are spot on with regards to the Defence Force deployment. When the Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Windy, requested deployment of the SANDF and a lot of other people, I sent him an SMS, a WhatsApp. I said to him, I understand his difficulty, and he wants a solution to the problem. But the deployment of the SANDF is not going to solve this problem. And it's still on my phone. I think you got it as well. So the problem is you can deploy those. That is just a visibility. With any commission of crime, there's two factors always involved. The one is the desire to commit a crime, and the other one is the opportunity to commit a crime. Now, the presence of the police or the SANDF only control in a limited way the opportunity to commit a crime.
Yep.
But they can't be there in each and every street 24 hours. But the desire to commit that crime still persists. And once these two factors combine, the opportunity and the desire, then the perpetrator goes over into action. You understand?
Yep.
So the NDF deployment might be something to oppress gangsterism for some time, but it's not eradicating gangsterism at all. At all. Now, anyone thinking that the deployment of the SANDF is going to solve the problem is off the mark, totally off the mark. Now, let me say to you that in 2019, I think the 5th of July, I sent a draft a plan for the Western Cape to the Premier, crime prevention plan. And I made proposals how they should, from a provincial side, should actually address this. Something I worked on while I was with the minister. But then I finished there and I thought, okay, I've got this thing. Let me, forward it to the people who can use it if they want to. So I'm glad to see that they are busy implementing it. Some of the concepts which I proposed, I'm glad for that. But let me say that and whilst I was with the minister, I drafted the concept of the anti-gang unit. And so the anti-gang unit was then implemented in November, I think, 2018. But I made certain proposals in that thing, what needs to be implemented to operate optimally, And the objective was actually because the anti-gang unit is not the solution on its own to gangsterism. It's just a tool amongst other tools.
Yes.
You understand? So
it's one part of the equation. Yeah.
That's right. You have to use it in combination with the others. But I'm glad that the city of Cape Town, as well as community safety in the province, is working together actually to address the opportunity to commit a crime, but not the desire. Because to eliminate the desire to commit a crime, you have to provide an alternative to these youngsters. And that is not, you cannot do that by policing only. You have to ensure that they are attending school. You have to make sure that there's an alternative for them in terms of training for in a particular job and employment per se. As long as unemployment persists and poverty persists within a community, that problem is going to persist in our communities.
Yep.
But the anti-gang unit was supposed, I don't know whether it is in practice now, but at the time when I left, it was not in practice, a close cooperation between the anti-gang unit, the detectives which they have with them, correctional services, as well as the prosecuting authority and SARS. Because gangs.
So it was like a multi-agency effort.
Precisely. That is actually what I envisaged when I drafted this thing. And appoint the correct people with the right qualities, the right skills to lead this particular unit, and also to subject the officers who are going to be recruited for this unit to be subjected to lie detector tests as well. But they didn't do that. They just grabbed people from the stations. And I think within 1 month of the establishment of this unit, they lock up two police officers. They stole the money of other gangster in Beacon Valley and Mitchell's Plain. And they took the money out of the safe and they forgot to look up into the ceiling to see the camera there. So this is a special unit. And once you talk about a special unit, then you have to make sure you've got special people with the special skills in that particular unit. You can't create a unit and take everyone there. Then obviously, then you might actually leave the whole exercise.
You're just putting a logo and a name badge on
precisely
something.
It must be something. If you look at in America, the gang unit there, you must have 5 years, at least 5 years skill on patrols, and you must have a degree. A degree. The standard is high. Is a degree. Here with us, it's matric only, and there's no other qualification for you to make progress required to make progress. But nevertheless, that if that unit work together as with SARS, and then they can synchronize information, share information, because the plannings happens in correctional services. Now let me come back to, before I go to the criminal justice system. If you, as a defense lawyer, on a Monday morning, if you go to your lower courts, your district courts, and go and consult downstairs in the holding cells. Now, those cells looks like in Belleville, it looks like a cage, you know. You will see when those vans, the trucks comes in with those awaiting trial prisoners. It looks like what can I say? It is like you chase a lot of animals, into a cage, and these youngsters are there, and they got all sorts of languages. And the one saw me and recognized me, and he said, "Hey guys, Mr. Max is nou aan onze kant, man. He's on onze kant, He's on our side now." Now I look at these guys, and whilst you wait I was waiting in court for my case to be called. Then there were a couple of mothers, and the court wanted actually to postpone these cases and grant these children to the custody of the mothers, and the mothers refused. They said to the court, "I don't want him. I don't want them," because they don't want to listen. Now, those are the breeding grounds, Gideon, for gangsterism. I sit in court and I look at these kids and I said to myself, and the way that they talk, that the magistrate actually told them, "Listen, this is the language that you use." And he asked the magistrate, "Maar wat moet ek dan sê?" as ek nie so kan sê nie, wat moet ek sê? You know, this is the only language that they know and understand.
Yep.
Now, that is our future. That is our future. That is South Africans' future. Whilst I was with the Correctional Services Committee for 3 years and 6 months at National Parliament, we visited correctional centers in Mthatha in the Eastern Cape. We visited a correctional center there. There were about 100 odd kids between the ages of 10 and 16 in those cells. Some of them don't know who their parents are. They were not one day at school. They can't read and write. Now, and they are in for burglary, robberies, and they are kids. Now, what future is for those kids? You understand?
Exactly.
And from there, they must, if they have been released, where to? Where to? The only thing they know is to rob people. They don't have a house. They don't have parents who look and parent them. I was also invited once at here in the Western Cape Department of Social Development. Got also this youth centers, and I had a motivational talk there. Halfway, I could see I lose half of those kids in whilst I was, addressing them. Their minds is totally at a different place. For them, it is not this type of things which they are used to. You can see they start talking to each other. They don't even listen what you are saying. So that is the danger with our youth, and that is where if you want to stop gangsterism, you must have certain things in place to prevent the school leavers to leave school before time. You must have your social systems in place. There must be job creation and so forth. But say, for instance, you are lucky with the arrest of gangsters. We heard, a lot of gangsters been sentenced to life, 3 times life, and they only spent 15 years there. There's no such a thing of life in South Africa. You will, for the 3 murders, he received three life sentences. It's in the newspapers. It's only 15 years, then he's out.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, once there's a successful arrest, maybe through the POCA, the Prevention of Organized Crime Act, which take about sometimes a year, 3 years to make an arrest, because you have to investigate the whole syndicate, the whole structure, or more or less most of the structures, leadership in that particular thing. And it's a very tedious process. So it's not easy. And if it happens, there's a conviction, and they are being sentenced now for life or very long terms of imprisonment.
Yeah.
That per se doesn't stop gangsterism. It doesn't stop gangsterism. Once they are in jail, they get access to cell phones, which is prohibited actually in jail, but they get it. We see it in social media on a daily basis that what happens. In jail, they've got ranks. It depends on the seriousness of the crime which you committed. Then you get a ranking. The more serious the crimes are, the higher is your rank. So it's a promotion. It's not a punishment for them per se to go to jail for a murder. And there's no deterrent. Jail sentence is no deterrent to gangsterism and to gangsters. Whilst they are there, they plan from inside there a hit on somebody outside. So the structure is still being managed, from the inside. The only thing is the leader outside is being replaced by somebody during the time that the real leader is in jail. So the arrest of a gangster, of a gang structure, is not eliminating the whole gang activity per se at all.
No.
So that is discontinuing, and that is where they find out where warders' houses are, and then these people get threats. If you don't bring in some contraband or weapons or whatever the case may be, and therefore you read on a regular basis that correctional officers has been arrested. You understand, for contraband, bringing in contraband or whatever the case may be. Some of them are, as I said, inherently corrupt. Others don't have a choice as to protect their family and their own lives.
They're being very effectively threatened and coerced, and it does indicate as well that you're dealing with a long-term problem here, where it's cultural almost to a degree. There's a cycle that reinforces it every generation, and as a matter of interest, when the textile industry in the Western Cape collapsed in the mid to late 90s, did that have a very strong effect on or exacerbating the problem, making it worse? Because when it comes to gang economy in America, the so-called gangs there, whether you talk about the Bloods or the Crips or whatever in the inner cities, that's very much a gang economy reliant on prostitution and very much on drugs as a form of income, especially crystal meth. Those are the two big money spinners, and they do protection rackets on the side. What is the South African gang economy heavily reliant on? And obviously the poverty mechanism feeds into it, but did it get worse after the 90s?
Let me say, my experience is when I joined the police, gangs didn't have access to, let me start with firearms, to the extent that as what is the situation now. It was more or less pangas, knives, and zip guns. Here and then we caught somebody with a real firearm, and they improve, actually become more modernized and become more effective, and very very professional, in their activities, more sophisticated, actually, which is what we say. But if you take the way that the police service actually address gangsterism, is still in the same way when I joined the police in 1980.
Okay.
You understand? And not with in terms of the 21st century technology which is available, which I will elaborate later on. And that is where and obviously your organized crime. That time, the organized crime was not to the extent as it is at the moment, because it was more very amateur, in an amateur manner. But now they are professionals, because all this, the movies like Escobar,
Yeah.
and those people in America, they are being copycat by from that particular people. So the practice is more or less the same as in America, as you mentioned. Now, one of the things similar to Pablo Escobar and El Eto, they start first with those to corrupt those who are in power, to ensure that they are safe. Those who got the power to arrest them, to interfere and obstruct their activities. The same modus operandi is here. So if you would take this lieutenant colonel was killed now last year, Kania.
Yes.
Now, I'm not aware that they made an arrest as yet on that particular killing. It's only this other guy which they actually arrested, the other, not shortly thereafter, for this tracing of the telephone.
That's it.
Now, there's two reasons why, one of two reasons why this guy has not been arrested. The first is that the police intelligence is not good enough because they more focus on each other than on the core mandate.
Yeah.
Or in the gang fraternity, the guy who actually is the killer, if they identify him as the weak link that he would be able to identify and bring out who's behind it, then he got killed by his own gang. You understand? To
Yeah.
eliminate him. So, and that is also the case with witnesses. You will see the reason why um, your conviction rate on gangsterism is so low, similar to the taxi fraternity, the crimes committed in the taxi fraternity, is because of the intimidation and the killing of witnesses, because the government is not in a position to protect them. And sometimes when they are in the witness protection program, the cases take too long. And then these guys walk out of the witness protection and got killed, and the cases fall flat. So if you don't have evidence, proper evidence, irrefutable evidence, you are not going to ensure a conviction.
That's a
So
fact.
yeah, so that is a problem.
So that actually brings me to our next or second to last discussion point. There are strong and persistent allegations always of police involvement with gangs. I recall that the Institute of Race Relations, in their third Broken Blue Line report that came out a couple of years ago, their fourth one is due shortly. They actually put the position forth that according to their research and analysis, the SAPS is an organization that is more infiltrated by criminals and criminal organizations than the other way around. How would one, what are the, or how true are these allegations of police involvement with gangs, and to what extent, if that problem is as bad as it's publicized, how thoroughly entrenched in the organization is it, and how does one get begin to get rid of it?
Yeah, let me say yes. I don't want to mention names, but police corruption is rife in the police. That is now, undisputable fact that it is the case. And you will read in the newspapers, how people or police officers actually accuse each other in the Western Cape. The one is on the payroll of the other one, and some gang leaders will then accuse some police officers that they are on the payroll of their rivals, and vice versa. Now, there might be certain motives for these accusations. First, there might be some substance to the allegations. And secondly, and that is just to eliminate opposition, you understand,
Yeah.
and to bring that and to place those police officers' credibility, under suspicion. If it comes to the push that those police officers going to testify against them. So, but police corruption is rife. We've got in the police the anti-corruption units, you know,
Yeah.
and let me say, a lot of my clients which I had were charged by the anti-corruption units, police officers who came to me, but not one of them went to jail. I was successful on all those cases in the regional courts. So it's not always when there's a claim of corruption that there's substance to it. Once it is tested, there's a lot of media when the person has been arrested, but the day when and as you are in court and and the case is very clear that this person is going to be acquitted, then you will see the next day before the judgment that there's no media, because the media already realized that this case is not going to be, there's no conviction here, which is not going to make news. But nevertheless, corruption is real. Corruption is there in the police, and if you read how police officers are involved in cash and transit robberies, police officers recently involved in a truck which they hijacked with contraband, and of which they were busy actually, moving the contraband to a van which they used to transport it to a particular destination. That is a daily, phenomena, and it is there. And the difficulty is to eradicate it. Now, the Police Amendment Act, which is actually now, I think it closed already the inputs, made certain proposals of screening of potential candidates, as well as lie detector tests, etc., etc. But if that is going to be sufficient to eliminate potential criminals to enter, the police service, is another challenge. Once you work with human beings, there's always an opportunity for failure, a chance
Yeah.
for failure, because a human being is subject to failure. So if a machine which you can program can fail, then how more is a human being which got emotions, and all these things, and which is sometimes driven by circumstances. So yeah, but I think there's an effort to address this particular issue. How successful it's going to be is another question, and that needs to be seen.
Yeah, that's. I was about to say it's very much as much as we talk about a culture of gangsterism amongst communities. There's also, if a problem is pervasive for long enough in an institution, whether it's police or whether it's any other thing, it becomes culture, ingrained culture as well, a culture of criminality, a culture of failure, a culture of corruption, and that really is very much a leadership challenge, which does bring us very, very nicely to my closing point for our discussion, General. If you were offered, if you were offered the position of National Commissioner of Police, would you accept it? Would you consider taking it?
Yeah, a good question.
The most difficult question for last, you
Yeah,
see.
let me let me let me say, Gideon. Policing was for me a calling, and it was for me an honor to serve our communities. And those who worked with me whilst I was commissioner or all the other ranks, I was a very strict, disciplined guy, and these guys knows me. I'm a very jokey guy as when the time for my jokes, but once I was in my work, my work is I do my work, and I try my best, and I gave my best, but circumstances, made it impossible for me to really fulfill what I really wanted to do. And once you become a provincial commissioner, you've got only 5 years service there left. You are permanent in the police until you occupy the position of provincial commissioner and national commissioner. Then the moment you are appointed as provincial commissioner, you've got 5 years left in the police. So I was very young in my ranks, very young, and as a result, I exit at a very young age, the police. But the desire was still, to be on top, because as I told you that I left school with a standard six, and I was a farm worker, railway worker, and I had this desire to become a police officer and to become a general, and I had to look for my path and cut it out. And I worked damn hard, to obtain in police and education wise what I've got today. And as I said, it was an honor to serve the country and the public and so forth. But if the president call on me and ask me to serve the country in that position, it is it will be a request which I will seriously consider, not because for self honor, but in the interest of the country and in the interest of our communities. But it will come with reservations that, as you can see, the National Commissioner at the moment is fighting with the National Minister about his to protect his own turf as National Commissioner.
Yes.
Now, I
We had a
support,
we
yeah,
had a wonderful discussion about that exact problem of
yeah,
ministerial interference. But yes, please.
yeah, I respect his stance, and I support him in that, because you know, the police are where it is usually because of this poor political decisions and interferences and political appointments. And that is where we are at the moment, why we are at the moment. And regulation 47(1)(k) is not going to work for me, not at all. Political interference is not going to work for me. And as I said previously, that Putoy, she took up that position and she went to the president. When the president appointed us, she asked him for his support. He promised it. And she got the powers to appoint, and she did appoint already people which she feel that is people with the necessary qualifications, experience, and caliber, which will assist her in serving and executing her constitutional mandate. Now, when it comes to me, and if I agree to accept to take up that position, that will definitely be on the same terms. No politician is going to tell me who I must appoint or not, who I must transfer or not, because in terms of the Constitution, Section 207, it after the only political person who will make the appointments is the president and appoint the national commissioner. And from the national commissioner's appointment, that responsibility of transfers and appointments is the sole responsibility in terms of the constitution of the national commissioner, because the national commissioner have to answer why he or she is not addressing crime properly, although the national minister must be informed of these changes, because he's got a public mandate to account to Parliament, to the House. But to be informed is not to say he have to decide and determine who must get a job or not and who can be transferred or not. So as soon as they can remove that, it will make it easier for the sitting and current national commissioner, and also for any future person who actually is going to be appointed in that particular position. But yes, let me say, if there's one thing that I would like people to remember the day then they greet me for the last time, and that is that Lennit Max, he always contributed to the safety and security of the people of South Africa. And I differ with people on this in this regard, but as long as I know that I don't do it because I want to be funny, but I do it because it's in the interest of this country and of us, of our people.
Well, that's exactly it. Policing is such a vital function. It's in many cases so thankless. It's also not it's not a profession that's going to make anybody rich. a fundamental and strong belief in what policing is, and the concern of yourself thereof is exactly it. And I really do hope, I do hope as my little wish upon the star, that you get a shot at this, that the political interference in the operation of the South African Police Service ceases, because there is no way it will ever be in a position to fulfill its constitutional mandate if it continues along that line. And I cannot imagine it's good for the morale or the spirit of the people trying their best to do that job, knowing that politicians are constantly treading on their toes.
Yeah, let me say, the police is the primary entry point into the criminal justice system. And if there's a problem at that particular entry point into the criminal justice system, it affects the rest of the criminal justice system. And, as I said previously, that the trust in the police is at a very low level, at an all-time low. And something needs to be done. And the only person who can bring about change now is the president of this country. And the longer the president is taking to address this particular issue, the more problematic will it become in future if we are being faced with another unexpected insurgents, which we similar to what we have experienced recently. So the quicker the president addresses issues, the better for us all.
Yeah, I think my last comment before I'll say goodnight to everybody is I can't ignore the thing you pointed out. Personally, I think the social frictions, the flashpoints, the tensions under the surface that brought this crisis in KZN and Johannesburg, that culminated in that series of violent incidents to the front, that hasn't gone away. Those pressures haven't subsided. They may, in fact, even have gotten worse. So a time for decisive action and getting our law enforcement entities back in the fight, and effectively so. The time is now or never. I don't know if you've got any final words on that regard, General.
Yeah, if it's not now, when? If it's not us, who?
Yeah, spot on. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I appreciate it. We'd love to have you back in 2 or so weeks again, if that suits your schedule. But if you are going to go on holiday or you need to work on the PhD, just let me know. If you can take a break from it, that's great.
Okay, no, you're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, General. And to the audience, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. I will not be having a stream tomorrow night. I'm a panelist on another discussion at another address. I will put the links in all the social media. Thank you for being here, spending your time with us. Hope this was as informative for you as it was for me. And see you all again soon, tomorrow night and next week. Stay safe, stay warm, and have a good evening.